Welcome. The goal of this video is to demonstrate how a writer conduct a self-analysis of their rhetorical skills and their critical thinking skills by reviewing one of their own papers and conducting rhetorical analysis of that paper. So for this paper, or for this video, I'll use an example of a paper that I wrote for the English 2010 class, which was my letter to the editor assignment. And in this assignment, I had to write an academic paper in which I argued why a particular speaker, such as Mark Twain, should be invited to campus to speak to students. And I used sources, academic sources that explained the use of guest speakers. I also used some other academic sources that explained who Mark Twain was and why he had some good qualities that would make him a good speaker for the campus. So using the template document for our course, there is a section for rhetorical analysis. And the purpose there is to help us understand our ability to use effective arguments, claims, and evidence, and to help us understand how well do we pay attention to the rhetorical situation that our writing takes place. So the first part of this rhetorical analysis involves identifying the elements of the rhetorical situation. And if we think back in our course, we've talked about the rhetorical triangle, right? And at 3 points of the triangle, there's 3 important elements of that rhetorical situation. Who is the author, who is the audience, and what is the message? We also need to understand what is the context in which those things come together. So first, the author is my sumac character, Dominic Lafolie, who's a student at the university. The audience is anyone who reads the student newspaper. So primarily students, but also faculty, staff, and administration might also read the student newspaper. And the message that Dominic wants to share is to convince the school that Mark Twain will be a good guest speaker for the students. And then the context is that Dominic is writing this letter to the editor of the student newspaper. And so it's a semi-formal situation where he's trying to reach the whole university audience through a piece of academic writing. So that's the first part. And that's quite simple. We're just trying to identify the elements of that rhetorical triangle. What is the situation that this text is existing in? And what is it trying to accomplish? Now, for the second part, we will use a process similar to what we used when we conducted our rhetorical analysis paper of a TED Talk. The difference here is that instead of analyzing a TED speech, you will analyze your own paper. And so the goal here is to identify what are the different types of rhetorical strategies that you used in your paper, give us some examples of those, and then think about what kind of appeal is that rhetorical strategy doing? Is it appealing to logos or pathos, ethos? And then to try and describe what is the effect on the audience? Why is the author using that strategy? And how does it connect to their overall purpose? So I already have one here. At the beginning of my paper, I use a descriptive image, followed by a bit of a logical argument. And I put in the quote there that Dominic writes that he wants students to not only think about the great experiences they have on campus, such as midterm examinations or the masquerade ball, but they also need to be thinking about what they will do after they leave university. And so there is a very slight use of descriptive language. It's not great, but there is some. And I think that can be an appeal to pathos. It tries to get the audience thinking about some key memories from their time at the university and helping them relate to the speaker because they have those shared experiences. But then I think there's also a heavy emphasis on the logos. It's trying to help the audience understand that you can't just think about the now. You need to also be preparing and thinking about the future. And so I have written a statement there to explain why I think Dominic, it was really me writing in Dominic's voice, why that was included and how it relates to the overall purpose of the paper. Okay. If I go back to my paper, I can identify some other things that were used. And you might want to just start from the beginning and go along like you did with your TED Talk rhetorical analysis, but I'm just going to pick a few different ones that I want to highlight. Okay. So here is a sentence that I want to highlight. Okay. And this is where Dominic in his paper makes frequent use of academic research articles, lots of citations. So I'm going to write here, citations of research articles. Okay. And I'm going to put in that example. Okay. And what kind of appeal is it? Well, I think it's doing a couple things. One, there is an appeal to ethos. There's also an appeal to logos. Now, let me explain this. I think the appeal to ethos is that Dominic is trying to build the reader's confidence in him as a writer and that they can trust him in his opinion. And one way he's doing that is by showing that he has researched this topic and he is providing evidence from respected researchers. So that's building, hopefully, the audience's confidence in him as a speaker. But there's also some logos there. He needs examples to explain the principles that he's talking about. And the research articles provide those examples. So I think that also helps build his logical argument. So then I'll write a summary of that and say that the citations accomplish two things. First, they build Dominic's reputation in the audience's eyes as a serious student and well-read researcher. This means that they can trust his argument. Okay, and then the other part here is that he also appeals to their sense of logic by providing evidence to support his claims. Okay, this helps the audience trust him as an author and also trust his claims because he offers clear evidence from research. Okay, and then I could go on and do that with a few others. Let me get one more example that I think is a little bit different. I used lots and lots of citations. So I think there's lots of ethos and pathos appeal, ethos and logos appeals, but primarily the logos ones. But there's one later on that I think is an interesting example of pathos that there isn't a lot in this paper. And this is when we get down to when he describes Mark Twain. And he has this quote here. Okay, so the quote is that the argument is that we want to make that Mark Twain is a good speaker and he'll engage the audience. And that, I guess, was in further, oh, right here. According to Payne, Twain was the sensation of the day. When he rose to speak on these occasions, he was greeted with wild cheers. Whatever he said, they eagerly applauded. And I think that this is what I would describe as an anecdote, a short story. So I'm going to put that example in there. Okay. And I think that it's primarily appealing to pathos. Now, there is a little bit maybe of an ethos, you could say, because it is coming from a source, so it's showing that it's well researched. But I think primarily it's about pathos. And the goal here is by sharing this story, the author is helping the readers imagine Mark Twain as a speaker and his emotional impact on audiences. Now they stand up and cheered. And I think that this is helping the readers of the newspaper think, oh, this would be exciting to see someone that makes other people feel so excited. So this can help readers accept the author's thesis that Twain would be a good speaker for campus. Okay. And so what I recommend is that you go through your paper and find at least 4 or 5 examples of different types of rhetorical strategies that you used in your paper. analyze them, what type of appeals are they, and overall, what's the purpose or strategy to explain it. Then you'll have lots of evidence, a better understanding that how you as a writer construct your arguments. What kinds of appeals do you use to connect with audiences, and how effective are you at making that connection back to your thesis statement? Now, you may find that you don't know what the appeal is. You might look at some of the things you did and you think, I don't know why I did that. It doesn't really connect to my thesis statement. Then maybe talk about that. Say, that maybe the purpose of this is not very clear in the paper, and it may confuse readers or takes them on a tangent. It doesn't really relate to my topic. Or it's kind of a tangent. It gives some interesting, fun information, but maybe its purpose isn't totally clear. And that's helpful to learn. That's good to reflect on so that you can plan for the future. One of the things I noticed is that, as I mentioned, I rely heavily on logos appeals. And so actually, when I wrote this paper, I tried to include some pathos appeals, some rhetorical questions to inspire the audience. I tried to use a few anecdotes and examples to help people connect more emotionally with the topic, but they're still very minor compared to the very logical approach I take to writing. And I think that's a helpful thing for me to reflect on and think about. How effective is that? Is it right for the audience? Is it good for the rhetorical situation? And that's what you will reflect on and talk about when you write your report later on. But for now, you just want to get a list of this data, fill out this chart, and then come to class prepared to talk about it